I remembered who the killer was before I even pressed play. What I didn't remember was just how good Ashley Judd is in this film. Welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary. As you know, I'm Dave. I've been living with movies for over 40 years now. This is a pod where I revisit films that I've lived with over the years and see how they hold up now. Occasionally I'll look at a new film that I haven't seen or an older film that I haven't seen. So not through specs or box office numbers or production trivia, but through the performances and the themes and how my relationship with the film has changed over time. That's the kind of things that I talk about. Today, I'm revisiting Kiss the Girls from 1997. I first saw this film when it came out. It was a reasonably big deal, and I've seen it quite a few times over the following years, but it's been a while since I circled back to it. The interesting challenge with this one is that I already knew the ending. I know who the killer was. I just remembered it. Like I said, I've seen it a few times. So the question becomes, with these kind of films where you know the twist, does a serial killer thriller like this still work when the mystery's already been solved? On the rewatch, I wasn't still trying to solve the crime. I'm looking at the performances, and I find myself with these kind of ones looking for clues, and I'm seeing if there was an Easter egg in there that shows me who the killer is. And also I'm wondering whether the journey is still enjoyable when I know the destination. 1997. It's one of my biggest, it probably was my biggest year at the cinema. I was going nearly every week. I was living in Sydney at the time, in southern Sydney, and my flatmate and I were mad on movies. He was one of the first people to get into, I remember Laserdiscs were a thing back then. I think they were called Laserdiscs, the big ones that look nearly like an LP size, but as a disc. They had incredible sound. I remember he used to plug it into his massive speakers, and he used to show people how the shootout in Heat, when they're trying to get out of there, De Niro and Kilmer and Sizemore out in the streets, and there's a massive gunfight that goes for about 10 minutes. And the Laserdisc of Heat used to show that really well. I'm amazed people didn't call the cops in our apartment building. Must have thought there was a home invasion going on. Anyway, him and I used to go nearly every week. We'd pick a film, and it was easy back then. There were all these great movies coming out. Some of the ones I remember seeing that year included LA Confidential, Boogie Nights, The Edge, Good Will Hunting, Titanic, Air Force One, Con Air, Face Off, The Fifth Element, Scream 2, Austin Powers, Conspiracy Theory. I've probably forgotten quite a few others. Like I said, nearly going every week. And it wasn't a question of is there a good film? It was which one. That's when movies were right in the middle of our culture. So Kiss the Girls arrived somewhere in the middle of that year. And more than that, this film really came out it was the golden period of the serial killer thriller. Silence of the Lambs in 91 had really supercharged this genre, and people couldn't get enough of these movies. You know, you had Silence of the Lambs, you had Seven, you had The Usual Suspects, you had Copycat, The Bone Collector a couple of years after, just to name a few off the top of my head. But more than that, serial killers were still a huge part of popular culture. There were real-life cases constantly in the news. In Australia, for example, we had the Ivan Milat case. He'd been captured by then, but there were others just around the corner. The Falconio case, I don't think that had happened yet, but we were getting used to that. There was these sort of things happening all the time. And it was this idea that someone ordinary could be hiding something monstrous underneath. And that really captured our attention, and it captured audiences' attention. So apart from these dynamics, this was also the height of the Alex Cross phenomenon. James Patterson's books were everywhere. I can remember people reading them all over Sydney, sharing them. They were a beach read, but they were exciting. I can remember people who didn't read books reading the Alex Cross series. And I can also remember being given Along Came a Spider as part of a 25th birthday present from friends that year in 97. So Alex Cross and James Patterson were really at the height of their fame for me, for my generation in Australia. What's this one about? Well, Alex Cross is the main character, played by Morgan Freeman. He's a forensic psychologist. He's also a detective, and he plants himself into an investigation because his niece Naomi has disappeared. This investigation takes him to North Carolina. There is a serial kidnapper who's known as Casanova. Casanova is abducting intelligent, sort of, intelligent young women, or creative or strong women, and he keeps them imprisoned as part of a disturbing fantasy. One victim, Dr. Kate McTiernan, that's Ashley Judd's character, she manages to escape, and that changes everything. For the first time, the police have someone who's actually seen inside the killer's world, and she becomes just as important to the investigation as Alex Cross himself, and they start to piece together the identity of Casanova while trying to prevent him claiming another victim, and it goes on from there. This one was directed by a guy called Gary Fleder, Fleder. Not a name that I had remembered. I had a quick look into his career. He made Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead a couple of years before. That's not a bad little film. He made A Runaway Bride following. That's an odd choice. But he also made a really good film called Don't Say a Word in 2001 with Michael Douglas. That's worth checking out. I remember seeing it at the time. I read the book as well. And that's one I'd like to revisit. He's very of his time. I can tell that by the way he directs this film. It's a polished 90s thriller style. There's no auteur touches. Just keeps it moving. Doesn't make it too dark, too grim, too somber, and creates suspense without relying on excessive or over-the-top violence. So it keeps it mainstream, keeps it mass appeal, lets the performances carry a lot of the tension, does well. Morgan Freeman, he was really at the height of his fame. I did a pod a couple of months ago about Street Smart from 87 with Christopher Reeves, and Morgan Freeman was in that as the pimp. I'm still recovering from his performance in that. It shattered all my preconceived ideas about Morgan Freeman in a good way. But, you know, he had Shawshank Redemption 3 years before this, where he just became a megastar. Followed it up with Seven in 95. And I think by 97, Freeman had almost really cornered the market on these thoughtful, intelligent authority figures that you can trust. In some ways, I feel Alex Cross is like a combination of Red from Shawshank and Somerset from Seven. He's really calm for the most part. He does lose his cool in one pivotal scene in the interrogation room, which is great to see. I like seeing Morgan Freeman lose his cool or act in a different way, and that's what I saw in Street Smart. But for the most part, he's patient. He's really believable as a psychologist. I can tell by the way he interacts with troubled people. He gets on their wavelength. He uses a lot of those tricks that you need to in that space. Takes me back to my psych degree a little bit in counselling people. He's very savvy. Great hostage negotiation scene at the start too. I have underestimated him over the years. I got so used to him being the voice of wisdom, but Street Smart has really, I think, recalibrated my opinion of Morgan Freeman. All right, Ashley Judd. This was really the revelation of the rewatch for me, and it reminded me of just how much momentum Ashley Judd had by this point in her career in '97. She looked like she was going to be one of Hollywood's next major stars if she wasn't already. She'd made Heat a couple of years before. She has a pivotal scene in Heat when Pacino. Well, not so much Pacino actually. It was the other cops have got her there in a room. They're trying to lure Val Kilmer into appearing, and he does, and she has to ward him off without letting the cops know. She's brilliant in that. She shows a lot. But anyway, I'll talk about that when I get around to that pod. She made Smoke the same year. Again, she was only in one scene, but she was incredible as a crack-addicted young mother. Well, she doesn't become a mother, but anyway, that's a great scene going up against Harvey Keitel, and she is incredible. A Time to Kill in '96. I have to be honest, I haven't seen that film for ages. I'd actually forgotten she was in it, but I'll rewatch that. And she played the pivotal role in Norma Jean and Marilyn in '96, which I think was like a TV movie, but she was exceptional in that. So this movie, I always remember this movie as when she got to lead and carry a, like a big deal picture, a big Hollywood film. And her role in this as Dr. Kate McTiernan is perfect for her because she always, Ashley Judd always seemed to me to have a lot of intelligence and bravery and feistiness and pizzazz and someone who stood up for herself. And I think this is why Kate McTiernan's the perfect character, because that's what she is. She calls out the killer after she gives a press conference when she escapes. And that feels to me like Ashley Judd. Intelligent, resourceful, really resilient. She goes through a lot in this film. She gets bashed around, and she carries it well, and she fights back, and she shows a lot of spark. Also, I want to call out the hypnotism scene with Morgan Freeman, where she's reliving her escape. It's one of the strongest dramatic scenes in the film, and she really gets to show a believable reaction to that traumatic event. Also, at the end, in the confrontation with the killer, she's superb in that, going from a relaxed setting to the realization that this is the killer, and then having to defend herself. She's got to go through a lot of physical acting, if you like, in this film. She runs into a fish tank at the start. She has to make that look believable. Two confrontations with the killer, and lots of emotional stress, and she carries it off really well. One of the great dramatic performances of the year, I think. This kind of film probably hurt any chances she had of getting nominated for any serious awards, probably. When you look at her career afterwards, she went on and made kind of similar films to this. My recollection is Double Jeopardy in '99, Eye of the Beholder the same year. Seemed to be in the similar genre as this film. Where the Heart Is was a more sort of dramatic role, I think. Someone Like You, I never saw that. I think that was a movie with Hugh Jackman, maybe. More a rom-com, maybe, or a romantic drama. High Crimes in '02, I think that might have even been a reteaming with Freeman. Again, like a thriller movie. And then she was really on to doing other things. She was in Frida, about Frida Kahlo, and Bug in '06. I remember that as being a really different film. I should check that out again too. But really, when I look at her career, this was like the the highlight. This is where she got to the peak of her career, I think, around this time, and she just was a part of the culture. Now, look, it's inevitable that I have to think about what happened and what might have been. She had everything. She had looks, charisma, intelligence, screen presence, acting chops, real acting chops. And knowing what happened, she was a prominent casualty of what Me Too looked at and brought to everyone's attention. And that's really tragic. And so watching this movie, every time I see her now, it's like a bittersweet feeling. And it's just a part of our culture that we've got to deal with, and hopefully take some lessons from, and try and reduce the chances of this happening. I know it will still happen to some extent, but hopefully not in the way that it did. Cary Elwes, interesting guy. Not someone I ever rated or thought was a good actor, if I'm brutally honest. He popped up in things like Robin Hood, Men in Tights, The Princess Bride. I never saw that movie. Twister. He was in Glory, though, apparently. I don't recall that performance, but I don't know. He always seemed too pretty for me. He didn't seem like a great actor, but he's quite good in this. And I did enjoy his performance in this film. And I couldn't see any telltale clues in the way he acts in this film, so I think he does a good job. Lots of things still work for me in this film. Morgan Freeman completely owns that Alex Cross character, makes it seamless from the page to the screen. When I sit down and watch this movie, I think, well, of course, Morgan Freeman is Alex Cross. Like, who else would it be? I couldn't picture Sam Jackson in this role, for example. Sam Jackson brings too much kinetic, sort of dramatic, cinematic sort of overtones. Morgan Freeman is just, he feels lived in all the time in all his roles, so he's perfect. I've already talked about Ashley Judd too. She's outstanding. It's like the part was written for her. The suspense remains at a heightened stage throughout the film, and that's what you want when you plug into one of these, 100-minute potboiler thrillers. Her escape is really brilliantly staged, I feel like. The camera angles, the pounding intensity of the music. She's crashing into trees and branches, and you don't actually know if she's going to get away. The investigation kicks along. We don't get sidetracked. That's what I like about it. It stays on point. We don't go off into meaningless stories that don't matter. Ultimately, to answer the question I started with, the film does work for me, even when I know the ending, because I'm enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying the process, the procedure. I'm enjoying watching the police work through the theories and knowing that they're going up dead ends, and it's still done well. And those scenes still have suspense. I also did like the parallel investigation, or the idea of sort of not copycats, well, sort of copycats operating. That was an interesting dynamic as well. And the way that those two stories are pieced together and how they become one story is well done. There's great chemistry as well between Freeman and Judd. It never gets cliched, or it never crosses over into romantic interest. It just stays what it is, which is deep respect, and it's handled really well. So I do think it's one of the better post Silence of the Lambs versions of this type of movie, if not the best, apart from Silence of the Lambs. What doesn't work as well? Some aspects of the police investigation are a little convenient, but you have to expect that. This isn't like a 10-part HBO series where you can flesh out everything. This isn't True Detective. We've got to contain this in 100 minutes. It's 1997. The police do have to make a few leaps. But look, we are where we are now, where we're getting used to looking at every nuance and every little niche of the investigation. So yeah, a few late twists do rely on a little bit of coincidence, but it never felt overused for me anyway. It does feel like a 90s thriller because it was made in the 90s, so it does feel very much of its era. Um, you know, I don't. It doesn't feel dated to me. Some of the technology is obviously some of that pre-internet broadening is obviously there. This is right on the edge of the internet becoming mainstream and widespread. So, but it doesn't feel stuck in the 90s. It's obviously less psychologically rich than the Silence of the Lambs or Seven, but the Silence of the Lambs was made by Jonathan Demme, and Seven was made by David Fincher. Nothing against Gary Fleder, but those two directors were masters of their craft. Gary Fleder has a great initial text here with the Alex Patterson novel. It's a good screenplay. It does as well as it can. It just doesn't have the enduring mass appeal that Silence of the Lambs or Seven still do in our culture. I still think this is a film worth talking about, though. So my reflection on the rewatch is that what surprised me most isn't the killer, because I already knew, and there aren't clues, I think, for me anyway, to identify who that is. It's Ashley Judd. I'm still thinking what a great performance afterwards, and knowing the ending doesn't hurt the film for me. That's why I've rewatched it lots of times in between, so that hasn't changed. The experience has changed now with Ashley Judd and knowing what she went through slightly, and just appreciating her more than I did at the time. And I can see how well the mystery's been constructed by the filmmakers and everyone concerned. So, is it a date film? Possibly. I think a suspenseful thriller always works. It's not too dark so that it becomes a bit sickening or a bit too much. So I think it is it's a good one to take someone to watch. You are going to get them clinging onto you, which is always what you want in a date, right? Hangover film, yeah, probably. It's pretty slick and entertaining. It's not overwhelming. It's done in about 100 minutes or so. You can sink into it. It just washes over you. And it is a watch alone. Perfect nighttime thriller. Watch it at night. Give it its respect. I think it's better. I think it's better than an afternoon, lunchtime watch. I watched it at night, and I think it still demands that. So look, my final thoughts. This isn't going to reach the heights of the Silence of the Lambs or Seven, but for what it is, I think it hits the mark and then some. I think it is one of the strongest serial killer thrillers to come out of that really strong period in the 90s when these films were coming out everywhere. Freeman brings that intelligence and calm authority. Judd delivers what I think is the standout performance in the film, and Gary Fleder keeps everything moving with confidence and with a sure touch. So I really appreciate the craftsmanship in this film, and it does have some heart-pounding moments in it, which is all you can ask for. So, and overall, I just got to remember and relive what an extraordinary year 1997 was for cinema, when movies were still talked about and still experienced. And I was 24 at the time, and movies were a real thing to do. Midweek, weekends, as a date, whatever. It depended on the movie. There was an abundance of choices back then for films. So I do think this film still sits comfortably among one of the strongest of the year, in one of the strongest years of moviegoing I've ever experienced. So I'm glad I relived and rewatched it. All right, that's it. That's Kiss the Girls from 1997. Hope you enjoyed that. Check it out. I watched it on a DVD, actually. It probably is streaming somewhere, or does pop up on the rotation. I just don't recall seeing it on one of the main services for a little while, so keep an eye out. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening as always, and see you next time.